All right, welcome back. Well, we'll have the Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Mr. Sunday Dare, joining us this morning. Good morning, and thank you for joining us today on the program. Well, yes, indeed, a lot playing out. The President speaking up yesterday about some plans and programs that they've got for the youth. Could you go ahead and tell us about now this National Youth Day? What's the key objective of that? Let's start from there.
Thank you very much, Chamberlain, and thank you for having me on your show this morning. Yeah, indeed, yesterday was the first and the maiden National Youth Day, a day that was approved on September 2nd by the President and Council to recognize and draw attention to the issues concerning our youth, but also as a day of engagement with our youth, a day to recognize some of our youth in various fields, innovators, and so many of them, to recognize them and reward them. So yesterday we had the opportunity for the first time to hold a National Youth Day. National Youth Day already has been celebrated by several other countries. Our own coincides with the Africa Youth Day, and we subscribe to the 4 E's of the African Union: employment, education, engagement, and entrepreneurship.
Well, just let's dive straight into it, Honorable Minister. One of the things that the President said, which of course you have also alluded to in your own comments, was that the youth must be encouraged and groomed to take key roles in politics, business, and other spheres of public life. Well, one that is, we can easily explain away the business angle and technology and entertainment and all of that. But the politics side is definitely the gap of mentoring and all of that. What's the plan? Is there a deliberate plan to groom and to mentor youths into politics?
Absolutely. Let me start by about 2 years ago, almost 2.5 years ago, this president signed the Not Too Young to Run bill, the very first time. That legislation was critical to protecting the participation and the right of Nigerian youth to come into politics. That's one. 2, if you back up and you check the data, quite a number of our youth from the age of 25, 1 or 2 ministers right now, actually started running for elections and participating in politics. But I also think that on the part of our lawmakers, they have a role to play in this aspect. On the part of government, at the Ministry of Youth and Sports Development, for instance, we have the Nigerian Youth Parliament. It is a small microcosm of the national parliament that we have. Nigerian youth from across the country who form a parliament, who hold sessions in different states, who also act and are mentored by our lawmakers in the National Assembly. Beyond that, the ministry has an agency called the Center for Leadership and Training. It's almost 5 decades old. And they train not just the youth, but also Nigerians, the public servants, on leadership. But I also think beyond government, various types of government, private sector also have a role, because we're looking for leaders not just in government or politics. We're also looking for leaders in the corporate world, in the private sector, because all work together to be able to develop the country. So I think there is, on the part of this president, we have seen a commitment to supporting our youth. On the part of the Ministry of Youth and Sports, we have quite a number of programs, even in the sports sector, because we need leadership not just in politics. We need leaders in sports development. We need leaders in several other spheres. And I think that a collaborative effort is what is needed at this point.
Well, you talked about that youth group that's been more than 50 years old in Nigeria now, but no one hears of these things. Many times we do not hear the voices of the youths that government has been catering for, mentoring and all of that. You talked about the Nigerian Youth Parliament. Of course, I know that there is such a thing in Lagos as well, but we don't hear them. No one hears them, and consequently, now that government is calling for dialogue with the youth, there really is no youth force that government can talk to. What's the plan then to ensure, to bring these youth initiatives into the mainstream so that people can begin to hear them and the youth themselves can begin to aspire to become like the kind of the youth that the government is supporting mightily?
Well, first, a good correction, quick correction. The Nigerian Youth Parliament is not the one that is 50 years old, but it's been around for almost over 5 or 6 years. And it has its footprints all over the country. Every single state has a youth parliamentarian, about 3 or 4 of them. And they meet, and they discuss, and they go from state to state. They also come to Abuja to the National Assembly. But beyond that, I think the challenge has been being able to bring together all the Nigerian youth organizations under a single umbrella. Recall that we have the Nigerian Youth, Nigerian Youth Council, which is the NYCN. In the last 2 years, we've had 5 different presidents. We've held several meetings with them to resolve the crisis. That has been the umbrella body for the Nigerian youth, put together, supported by government, and then supervised by the Ministry of Youth and Sports Development. But then they ended up with 5 different presidents, each laying claim to the presidency of the NYCN. Beyond that, each of them also going and engaging with governments, state governments, engaging with foreign embassies, creating a confusion. So we have been involved. We've been trying to resolve it. They've gone to court severally. Several cases are in court right now, and that makes it almost impossible for the government to engage with them. But also, you must also understand that the youth of this country must also be given the opportunity to find a way to organize, to learn the process, to resolve their crisis, because that is part of mentoring. At this point, we still have the NYCN in crisis. We have the Nigerian Youth Parliament as the standing parliament for Nigerian youth. They have their footprints all over the country. But the ministry 2 months ago gave a call out to every single youth organization in this country that is registered to come and register on our website. Our attempt is to create a national youth database. And once we have all these groups together, we can now move forward to invite them for a national youth conference or convention. And at that, we'll leave the youth independently to decide their leaders, bring up a new constitution. This has been in the offing in the last 2 months. On our website, we have over 5,000 youth groups already registered. That is our attempt to create a more comprehensive, more encompassing, more focused leadership for the Nigerian youth, and to bring about a restart so that all the problems we have encountered with the NYCN and a couple of others will be once and forever buried.
One of the ways in which I don't know if this will serve as some kind of solution or at least some idea, reference the NSAS protests that seem to happen spontaneously all over Nigeria. Now, most of them were mobilized for the protests through unconventional platforms like the social media. I don't know if that would be useful to government. Right. But then the question here is that it's at this same time that there are talks about regulating the same platforms through which these guys mobilize themselves, organize themselves, and all of that. So, of course, there is good reason for that in the light of fake news and all those things that the Ministry of Information has been talking about. So what's the balancing act? What's the plan for a balancing act now, seeing that the youth used it to mobilize themselves productively, and the federal government is talking about regulating the same platforms?
I think let me first bring a global perspective to this. I think each one of us, beyond the youth, globally, both in politics, in economy, in education, every one of us benefits from the internet in terms of the social media platforms that we have, in terms of digital technology. We have e-commerce, we have e-education, we have e-health, we have e-government. So everybody benefits from it. The fact that our youth used it to mobilize is commendable. But also they talk about regulating the social media. Has been a talk that has been around for a while. In other countries, we've seen other countries take, practical steps in that direction. This country has not done that. Even during the NSAS protest, the country had an option. The country never went for that final option. There was no time. The cyberspace was shut down. People were still able to connect themselves, use their social media platforms. And that shows a government that is committed to the rights of freedom and association of every citizen of this country. But also, the question of fake news is bothersome, not just for Nigeria, but for every part of the world. For us, the protest brought home the dangers of fake news. Recall, several months back, Nobel laureate winner, Professor Wole Soyinka, he said fake news is like the bomb that can destroy the world. And he's sure that that fake news that would destroy the world will start from Nigeria. That's from Professor Wole Soyinka. Very predictive and insightful. But also, of course, you see, the talks around regulation. Of course, we have a National Assembly. It will have to go through the normal processes. We have a constitution. They will have to make sure that it does not violate certain provisions of the constitutions that has to do with freedom of expression. But also, where you have fake news destroying lives, the government has a responsibility to make sure there's some form of control. It is not a censorship, but some level of control. Even in broadcasting, even in journalism, we have some regulation. And I think that whatever is going to happen around the social media will be along the laws of our country. And I trust that the National Assembly will do right by every single Nigerian and will be guided properly by the Nigerian Constitution.
I mean, if you read through history, you find out that they even talked about the early 19th century, how even traditional media then, newspapers, they publish fake stories in order to improve their circulation. So it's been around way before. So I don't know about it starting from Nigeria.
You know, this is different. I know if it bleeds, it leads. But when you look at the speed of multiplication, you just saw it happen. You recall that when this started, we had a young guy under the basement of his father's house in America who simply went online and released a fake news that the founder of Apple, Steve, was dead. And within 4 hours of that fake story, the stocks and the shares crumbled globally. Hundreds of thousands of people who are shareholders lost millions, billions of dollars. That's just one extreme aspect. What happened during the protest has been reviewed to some extent. We've seen a debunking of several of the stories of death that came up. And I tell you sincerely, even as a journalist, everyone is worried about the negative impact of fake news. We must be able to separate the potential, the usefulness of the social media as a digital platform. And then we'll have to deal with the content. What kind of content do we want to have there? 9 years ago, I did an academic research at Oxford University. And I looked at the online digital media. I looked at the importance to participatory democracy, the importance to making sure that the rights and freedoms of everyone is enjoyed. And ultimately, I did say everyone has now become a journalist, and that the fact that everyone can publish any story at any time will create a problem for us. That was a prediction I made 9 years ago. And I said it's important to have safeguards, to have gatekeepers. If not, we'll end up where we are right now. So I think as a country, we must start to think of how to curtail fake news. There must be some level of responsibility. There must be some level of punishment to those that will create chaos out of mischief in our country. And I think every country is dealing with fake news, and how each country deals with it within its laws will be what it will be important.
Well, it's going to be, I think the messaging is going to be very key here. Look, let's not even bore people by going through the hypodermic needle theory, how they think Well, it's not that those messages, they're like magic bullet. It reinforces certain things that people already have. So people question, look, what is it that you already have in there that these things magnify? But look, when they talk about messaging, they think that government says, yes, we've got this policy for the youth, we mean well for the youth. And then they hear certain narratives saying, no, we have to make sure we regulate this. And it comes to them as though this is punitive on the part of the authorities. They don't see that distinction in saying, look, this initiative of the government about regulation means well, because from what they've seen before about regulating media, they think they've seen bad examples, and they say, look, you only know what someone can do by what they've done before.
Well, you know, Chamberlain, we just have to approach this with an open mind, because I know that up until now there have been talks about regulation. We have a civil democracy, and those at the National Assembly come from all parts of the country. Constituencies, they represent the people. And these lawmakers, we must put our faith in them. Recall that this bill came up sometime last year. It was truncated because it brought up issues like you have brought up about fundamental rights and the rest of them. It's back to the drawing board. It has become topical again because of what happened during the NSAS protest, because even BBC and a couple of other news organizations have also rolled out new rules. In our newsrooms across the world, there are new rules given to journalists before you can fly or run a story or publish a story. It's critical. A society without rules, a profession without rules, it becomes very chaotic. And I think that I return to the fact that I know that the narrative must be in such a way that there's public trust in what is going to be done. I think the challenge will be largely on the part of our National Assembly, because government cannot do it without the stamp of the National Assembly. We need to have a robust discussion around this. We need to hold public hearings. We need to have core professionals come to speak to it. For instance, you know, if you have watched the movie The Social Dilemma, you have about 7 of the top guys who worked ICT experts, who brought about Google and the rest, who maintain their servers, do their programming. They came out and said clearly that Twitter is programmed to spread false news 6 times faster than the factual news. They said it. It's there. And then that's for Twitter. What do you know about Facebook and a few others? So it's important that we start to deal with it now within the confines of our laws without violating the freedom of expression and the fundamental freedoms that are enshrined in our laws and also in the global laws of the United Nations. I think that's important. The earlier we deal with it, the better for us as a country and also as a profession. Because where everybody is a journalist, there's no gatekeeper. It ridicules the media. It creates the greatest ethical problem that will be ever faced by the media. It makes the work of core professional journalists extremely difficult.
You know, from your submission now, yes, the government wants to regulate social media. They see the need to regulate social media. But is government going to take a step back and say, look, why are people, not sold on this one? Perhaps because of the way that the authorities have approached it. Are they going to say, look, okay, well, we need to revisit this and ensure that we, on our part, communicate the right kind of messages to people as to why we are thinking this way, other than what they see saying, we have to punish them, we have to block this, we have to block the internet, because that's the messaging that they seem to get from the narratives of governments.
That messaging, unfortunately, that messaging is wrong. Like I said, on the part of government, if you see what happened in the last 3 weeks, the options were clearly there. But this government under President Buhari never went for that final option. The options were there at the push of a button. But the government never went for it. You can attest to that. People were streaming, people were texting, the social media was buzzing. When the government needed to go for that option, the government never went for that option. That is a level of trust. Secondly, if the messaging is sending mixed signals, it's just because we're coming out of the impact of fake news. And many people are stunned that this level of fake news can be distributed with short speed across the country. And many people think there needs to be a clear marker. And I think that conversations are ongoing. I think government messaging is clear, and it will be pushed further, that we need to take a look at the impact of fake news. That's one. Two, I keep going back to the National Assembly, because when you are in a civil democracy and you have the National Assembly, the makers of our laws, it's important to make sure they're part of this process. And they have processes that they have to go through. The public hearing process is not a joke. You have various civil society groups coming, you have interest groups coming, you have experts and professionals from the media. It's a wide berth. And then it goes through the grind and the processes before something is finally presented. I think Nigerians will have an opportunity to be part of making this decision. And ultimately, we're not looking at censorship per se, but we're just looking at guidelines and regulations. When you look at most of the professional organizations that we have, from the NBA, the journalism profession, the medical profession, imagine if every single person who can buy a stethoscope claims the right to carry out a surgery. Just imagine the chaos. We're at that point now because we live in a world where every single person is a journalist. Can you live in a world where every single person is a medical doctor? And I think this is a conversation that time has come for us to have. When you look at it, it's a conversation that is ongoing globally. And I think that we should do our own. We should have it now. We should have that crucial conversation within the laws of our country. And I'm confident that under this precedent, it will be done within the confines of the rule of law.
Well, definitely you also are aware of what has become popular as citizen journalism. We could go on and on this, but that's not really what we would love to talk about now. And I hope you'll be able to give us a little more time after the break in about 5 minutes or so, because the programs that government has come up with in recent time, the National Youth Policy of last year, the DEAL program, and so many of those, they have been there, but they weren't popular until now. Now, some might be perceiving these programs of government as a knee-jerk reaction to ease tension. What's the plan to assure the youth and ensure that these programs are not just getting traction now because of the need to ease tension, but that they are actually sustainable?
Well, thank you so much for bringing that up. Some of these programs are actually dated. But let me start. There are 25 youth-focused programs under this administration, started in the last 5.5 years. These programs are domiciled in about 7 ministries and about 9 agencies and departments. Because under the National Youth Policy of 2019, we have 13 thematic areas: youth and sports, youth and education, youth and science and tech, youth and drug abuse, youth and environment, youth and ICT, and you can go on and on. So other ministries needed to also have these programs. Youth and agriculture, cross-cutting. Now, 3 of these programs are directly under the Ministry of Youth and Sports. These programs have been ongoing. And you can talk of a few of them. The Empower, for instance, the Empowerment for Our Youth, the single largest empowerment program for youth in sub-Saharan Africa. Started 4.5 years ago. Over 500,000 have been rolled out after 2 years. Another 500,000, as approved by Mr. President, will start shortly before the end of this year on the Empower program. You look at the Young Farmers program, over 250,000 under the Ministry of Agriculture. You look at CBN Anchors program. So these programs are there. Let me tell you, I keep saying it, what's important is that our youth must apply themselves to these programs to benefit. It's like if you don't start a race, you don't expect to win or lose. So if the programs are out there on government platforms, the youth must apply themselves to it. On my part at the Ministry of Youth and Sport, the DEAL program was launched about a year ago. And the DEAL program has several components, which we have already activated. A couple of them, we're just activating them now because of lack of funds coming forth. Recently, under the stimulus program, we've just been approved in July of this year 4 billion naira to run digital skills for 500,000 of our youth. Several other ministries have similar approval. Recall, the 6 months that was taken away from us from the COVID-19 pandemic really set us back. Under this DEAL program, we have the work experience program, which is ongoing. We've done training with IBM and a couple of other
pardon, Mr. Dari. Well, we need to go to break now, but we'll come back and let you conclude your thoughts, and then we'll wrap it up in just a moment. Please join us again.
Thank you so much, Chamberlain. So, the work experience program, for instance, I also spoke about the digital training that we did, and it's ongoing with IBM and a number of strategic partners. We've lined up training with Microsoft and Google. But beyond that, I spoke to the 4 billion that's been approved for us to scale up the digital skills training of our youth across the country using different youth development centers in the geopolitical zones. That will soon be rolled out. My point is, when you Google and you search, you will find these programs. Some of them not yet started, but most of them already activated. And people have applied, and people can apply. In fact, the government is putting together the names of our youth that have benefited from various programs, not just from the Ministry of Youth and Sport, but from several other ministries, Agriculture Ministry, Communications and Digital Economy, training through Ministry of Industries. The ITF has trained over 2.5 million Nigerians, most of them youth. So a number of our youth are benefiting from this. There's a need to have most of them apply. But also, there's a realization on the part of government that we need to scale up the number of our youth that we onboard to benefit from this program. Because, we're dealing with a sizable population. We need to deepen our programs. We need to refocus some of them. But also, we need to accelerate the onboarding of our youth to benefit from the merit of these programs. As I speak, if you go on various platforms, apart from the Ministry of Youth and Sport, we created what we call Unrea, the Nigerian Online Youth Assembly. That was informed by research that we did that showed us clearly that the best place to engage the average Nigerian youth is online, because they spend between 6 to 7 hours online. So we put a lot of this content online. And the question you want to ask is, if an average youth spends 6 hours online, what are they looking for? Are they searching for these opportunities on the part of government? Are they searching for opportunities that are obtained on other platforms? I think that's going to be important. Let me return to the N-Power very quickly. Apart from the N-Power that we all know, we have the N-Tech, we have the N-Agro, and all of these have trained a lot of our youth across. The data is there. We're going to put out that data. But it's clear that we need to deepen some of these programs. We need to accelerate the onboarding of our youth, because we need to scale up. We need to scale up to the extent to which most of our youth can get the required digital skills that they need to be competitive, to become self-starters, wealth creators, and also employers of labor. And Chamberlain, if I may just add to what I've said so far. The Africa Development Bank, for instance, has this decent job for the youth program. And the commitment there, they have entrepreneurship and innovation multi-donor trust fund focused on African youth to create 25 million jobs, but also to provide the necessary investment and funding for them. This country has since keyed into it. The Nigerian Youth Investment Fund is designed along that line. It's 75 billion naira investment fund. So our youth can come forward. We've received over 1.2 million applications right now, and oversubscription for the half year this year. But we hope to get the necessary funding that we need to be able to expand it to take in as many youth as possible.
That brings me to another question now. The Youth Investment Fund that you just talked about now, oversubscribed, more than 1 million people and all of that. And a number of questions come up automatically. The training has started. Some people might be asking, what's the engagement process? How did we, because the president said in his speech, and you also alluded to it, that training has begun for the first batch of the beneficiaries. What's the engagement plan? What's the engagement platform? How did these people come in, and how can other people take advantage of this?
Absolutely, that's an important question. I think we're doing this in partnership with the CBN and the licensed microfinance bank, which is NISA. This is an agency on the CBN that has been able to operate over 20 similar government programs. They have the platform, they have the security for their platform, they've been able to disburse. For instance, during the lockdown, the height of COVID-19, they were the ones that the government used for the 15 billion COVID-19 fund for households and SMEs. So we're in direct partnership with them. People can apply through the NICEL platform, CBN NICEL platform. And there are processes. You know, when you apply as a Nigerian youth, you get a check mark or an asterisk if your application does not go through. That is the very first process. Then it is subjected to the next level. After that next level, that qualifies you to go for training. Recall, oversubscribed by 1.2 million. That is just application. When you receive applications, you have to now review the applications. And then those that pass through the second stage go for the training. Yeah, we just started training. About 2,000 to 3,000 are being trained right now because they have to be trained by FDI experts. It's a 3 to 4 stage process, and I think that that process has started. I think the most important is that the application portal is very active, and our youth should apply. We hope to scale up training from this week to about 5,000 because we have to use FDI certified trainers.
Is there a plan then to, maybe transfer some of these applications to other programs that are not the Youth Investment Fund, seeing the engagement and perhaps another way of engaging the youth, since government is already calling for engagement with the youth?
Well, first, because this program is designed for youth entrepreneurs, the requirements are slightly different. You must have an idea, a business idea. You must have a running enterprise. You must have a business plan. You must be able to show that whatever you want to invest in, you have the requisite skills and experience, or you have the market report that supports it. Even if you have a brilliant idea, and that idea is properly stated and explained, you deserve to get some level of funding. The funding is between 250,000 to 50 million. So if you're going to bring an idea, business idea, for entrepreneurship that will request for 25 million, you know that there must be some level of presentation and readiness that we'll have to look at. So this program is designed in such a way that if you don't make this entrepreneurship program, you may have to apply for another one. For instance, there's the 75 billion survival fund. The requirements there are not as stringent as our requirements. That is ongoing under this government, and it has about 4 different flavors. Beyond that, you have the Young Farmers program in the Ministry of Agriculture. You have the Anchors Borough program. You see, each of these opportunities for our youth have their distinct requirements. Some of our youth have been able to benefit from 2 or 3. And there's an audit that is ongoing, such that if you have benefited from 2 earlier programs of government as a youth, you might not be able to benefit from a 3rd one immediately because we have other youth that have been waiting in line. In fact, for the NYIF, if you have benefited from 1 or 2 similar such programs, because the database is there, we can find out through the CBN database or the NICEL database, you will not get on the priority list. We're looking for youth that have not benefited at all. And then after we've dealt with them, we can now start to look at those that have benefited from 1 or 2 other government programs. But also, we have a category of our youth who have applied serially to about 3 or 4 programs that have not benefited at all, or have been waiting in line for 8 months or 10 months. We will give them priority because they have not benefited at all. But I think that there are quite a number of opportunities for our youth being run by various ministries, not just the Ministry of Youth and Sport. They are online. You just need to Google and search them. But I think what's important is that we have also, coming out of this protest, we have about setting up our interactive call center or help desk for the Nigerian youth. We intend to employ 50 Nigerian youth to work around the clock. So our youth can call in, they can text or send an email to find out about this program. We're going to collate all the data. So when a youth calls in to say, what are the programs under the Ministry of Industries? The Ministry of Youth and Sport, from its interactive call center, can help and direct our youth in what to do. And when they apply, they can always send their details to us. We can put that together, approach the Ministry of Industries on behalf of the Nigerian youth and get that sorted out. And we think that running such a help desk can help our youth to get the information they need in quick time, to also get clarification and the proper guidance that they might need.
All right, we're winding down now, but part of what we also saw and learned from this protest is that there's also a separate category of youths who not really present in the social media. We saw how the protest started, how it degenerated, those who took it over and ran several other things over, contrary to the initial plan and objective of those who started it out. Is there any plan or program for those category of people? They could be artisans, they could be conductors, in that light, who perhaps are not averse with social media.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Chamberlain, that's really important. When I became Minister of Youth and Sport, I found out that the definition of youth to so many people is that of a diploma holder or a BSc degree holder. But we have to redefine the definition of youth. What really defines someone as a youth in this country and anywhere in the world is your age, not your educational status. So we had to find a way to design our program that is also bottom-up, that the opportunities presented to those that have diplomas and degrees and certificates is also presented to the vulcanizer on the street, the taxi driver who is also a youth who is struggling, the man who has a small provision store at the corner of the street. And as we speak, under the survival fund that is under the Ministry of Industries, Trade and Investment, for instance, right now, since last week, there's the category that goes to artisans and those involved in the transportation sector. Since last week, 30,000 Naira has been sent to their accounts directly. And I know quite a number, hundreds of thousands, will benefit in the next 3 to 4 weeks. Money paid directly into their accounts. There's also, under the survival fund, money that is going to support payroll for small businesses. Now, it's going to be important because we talk of financial inclusion. We talk about transparency. It's going to be important that each person is helped, even at the lower rung, to at least open a bank account. Because the only way the support coming from government can get to you directly, not through any intermediary, is by you opening a bank account. And I think so many of our people, the youth who are just there, have also opened bank accounts and they're receiving this support. So I think government is focusing on that lower cadre. When you look at the turn the protest took, yes, another category of youth were involved because they also had their own frustrations. But government is responding to that, providing them with what is needed. Some of them are in agriculture. They don't need a university degree to go into agriculture. They have been supported in one way or another. Again, on the whole, I think it's important on our part to ratchet up the numbers, to reach out to as many of our youth in the rural areas, even in the urban centers, who have skills, who have dreams and hopes and plans, to reach out to them, get them enrolled, get them supported. We must look at a generation of field officers for every of our program that can be boots on the ground to educate and to help some of our youth, most of them, to let them know that this opportunity exists, to help them to be able to apply and to help them to be able to benefit from it.
Well, just a quick follow-up on that one. Is there a plan to engage subnational authorities like governors to gather the data about the unbanked and undocumented youths in this case that we're talking about?
Well, two different categories you're speaking with now. Speaking to now, the unbanked, that is largely the responsibility of the CBN, and I know that in the last 3 years, the question of financial inclusion has been top on the agenda. At the Ministry of Youth and Sport, we have a team that has been working with the CBN in the last 1 year to make sure that financial inclusion is deepened across the country. As we speak, we just have about 44 million to 50 million people with BVNs. And I think that when you look at our population, and when you look at even the population of the Nigerian youth, you know, that number needs to go up. I know that apart from the CBN, we have the NCC and a couple of other agencies and departments of government that have been working. There's a national financial inclusion plan. When you look at what India did, India basically has one of the deepest and most penetrative financial inclusion, even to the rural areas. What they did was to get youth agents who had a small banking machine and who practically went to homesteads in far-flung places and got people registered, opened accounts for them. So you don't have to really walk into a banking hall. And I think that agent network is being built. I hope that once that is done, it will, of course, create employment for over 5 million youth who will serve as agents in the network for financial inclusion to be deployed across the country. And I think that CBN is working on that with the Bankers Committee. I hope that that will happen shortly. I was part of a meeting last year in Italy that looked at financial inclusion. We had Egypt, we had India, we had a couple of countries that have done that successfully using the agent network. That is the way to go because financial inclusion will be critical in the digital economy. Now, the other aspect that you spoke to, government on its part is also working with private sector. Because when it comes to not just financial inclusion, when it comes to empowering our youth, supporting them, I think we must have a collaborative approach. One of the greatest lessons we've learned during the COVID-19 pandemic, and as ascribed to and advised by the World Bank, is that government must deepen its collaboration with the private sector, not just in terms of infrastructure, national infrastructure and institutions, but also in empowering and supporting the youth. And I think that's the focus of government right now.
In conclusion, what do you think about those who are of the opinion that the youth exists within a society? Now, some of these interventionist programs, including financial ones, came up because the regular, maybe the DMBs, weren't carrying out certain functions. So they had to come up with intervention. Because at some point, the youth will leave that age bracket and get into society. So they ask, why don't we just have a holistic approach? Government needs to address some of these national problems such that you can get things based on merit. They don't have to look at you depending on who you are, where you come from. So if that pervades society, and then you could begin to address these holistic problems across board.
Absolutely. You know, that's an ongoing conversation because, you know, government evolves over time. We've had administrations that preceded this administration. For instance, you look at the Unrea report, for instance. This government has been bold enough to look at the report and say, we need to implement that report. That report will see us reducing the level of bureaucracy, the level of ministries and departments that we have. That's a new thinking. But I think the point you have made is also important. Certain holistic approach will be necessary for certain segments of the society. Let me speak to the youth demographic, for instance. We have the National Youth Policy. And under the National Youth Policy, we have the Nigerian Youth Employment Action Plan, which is in its final stage. And once we're able to conclude with the International Labour Organization and others on the decent job component of it, we're going to implement fully the Nigerian Youth Action Plan. And once we do that, some of the goals, objectives that we achieved are clearly stated. Part of it is to make sure that we place our youth in the millions on the part of entrepreneurship to create employment for them. And I think that is a model that has worked for several other countries. We've been able to domesticate it and work to implement it. I can speak for my own mandate area, but I think there's a new thinking in government. The Unrea report points us in the right direction. But I do agree that some of our youth that are youth today, in another 2-3 years, will drop off that youth club and get into the bigger Nigerian society. And I think that's where the whole essence of having a private-public sector collaboration, because in developing that holistic approach, we're going to need the inputs of the corporate world. And we've seen this government set up various committees, advisory on the economy. They've put together several documents. There's a thought process ongoing. That's what I can say. And I hope that very soon we're going to see a document that will change the narrative, the fundamentals of our economy for this country.
All right, we'll look forward to that. We know that you have to run, but we do thank you for your time this morning. Mr. Sunday Dare, Minister of Youth and Sports Development.
Thank you very much, Chamberlain.
We're back in a moment. Stay with us.